Feeling lost does not always mean you are doing life wrong. Sometimes it means the old map no longer works, and the new one has not become clear yet. That can feel deeply unsettling. Because from the outside, life may still be moving. You wake up. You go through your routine. You do what needs to be done. You answer people. You keep things going. And yet somewhere in between those moments, a quiet thought appears. Where am I actually going? That question can be hard to sit with. Because it does not always come with a dramatic crisis. Sometimes it shows up in ordinary moments. While making breakfast. While walking somewhere. While staring at a screen longer than you need to. While doing everything you are supposed to do, but not feeling fully connected to any of it. If you feel lost, pause for a moment. Not everything needs to be figured out right now. Because feeling lost does not always mean something is wrong. It can feel that way. It can feel like you have taken a wrong turn. Like you should be somewhere else by now. Like everyone else seems to have direction, and you do not. I think that last part is what makes it especially painful. Not just the uncertainty itself, but the comparison that quietly comes with it. Everyone else seems to know what they are doing. Everyone else seems to be moving somewhere clear. Everyone else seems more certain than I feel. That thought can settle very deeply if you do not question it. Because then being lost stops feeling like a phase. It starts feeling like a personal failure. But what you are feeling is more common than people admit. There are seasons in life where clarity fades. Where the path ahead is not obvious. Where the things that once made sense no longer feel certain. Where your old motivation no longer works in the same way. Where the goals that once drove you feel flatter than before. Where you keep moving, but the inner connection to where you are going becomes weaker. That does not mean you are broken. It means something is changing. And change does not always announce itself clearly. Sometimes it arrives first as confusion, or distance, or low-level restlessness, or the strange feeling that the life you are in still functions, but no longer fully explains you. That is why so many people mistake transition for failure. Because transition rarely feels polished from the inside. It feels uncertain, uncomfortable, sometimes even embarrassing. You think, I should have answers by now. I should know what to do next. I should be more sure than this. But what if that expectation is part of what is making you feel so lost? That is worth slowing down for. Because many people are used to moving forward with some kind of certainty. A plan. A direction. A timeline. A sense of what comes next. And when that disappears, the mind panics a little. It tries to fill the gap. It looks for answers. It searches for clarity. It tries to force direction, where direction may not yet be ready to appear. And when that does not work, you start telling yourself that you are lost. But being lost is not always a sign that you are in the wrong place. Sometimes it is a sign that you are in between. That is a very different experience. Between what was and what is next. Between an old version of yourself and a new one that is still forming. Between a life that made sense before and a life that has not fully revealed its new shape yet. That in-between space often feels unclear. Not because it is empty, but because it is changing. I think this is one of the most important things people rarely say out loud. You can be growing and still feel lost. You can be becoming more honest and still feel confused. You can be leaving an old version of yourself behind and still have no clear language for what is replacing it yet. That does not mean nothing is happening. Sometimes it means too much is changing quietly for clarity to arrive all at once. I remember how strange that phase can feel. Things that once motivated you do not work in the same way. Things you once accepted start feeling harder to justify. Conversations that used to feel normal start to feel slightly empty. Goals that once felt obvious start feeling less convincing. And because there is no dramatic explanation, you start wondering if the problem is you. Maybe I am just confused. Maybe I am overthinking. Maybe I have lost momentum. Maybe I am just not as driven as I used to be. But sometimes, none of those are the real story. Sometimes the real story is that your life is asking for a deeper kind of honesty than the old version of you needed before. That honesty can feel slow. It can feel like pause. It can feel like uncertainty. But it is not the same as failure. Now here is where people get into trouble. They feel lost and immediately try to force a clear answer. A new plan. A perfect goal. A new identity they can quickly step into. Something neat. Something certain. Something that removes the discomfort quickly. But forcing direction too early can create a second problem. Now you are not only uncertain, you are also trying to escape uncertainty before it has shown you what it is here to reveal. That usually creates even more pressure. And pressure rarely produces honest direction. It usually produces borrowed answers. The answer that sounds good. The answer that looks productive. The answer that would make other people less uncomfortable with your uncertainty. But not always the answer that is truly yours. That is why this moment needs something different. Not panic. Not premature certainty. Space. Space to notice what no longer fits. Space to notice what you are outgrowing. Space to admit what no longer feels true, even if you do not yet know what replaces it. That is still movement. It may not look dramatic from the outside, but internally, it matters deeply. Because once you stop demanding instant clarity, you begin to notice quieter truths. What drains you now? What feels forced now? What you only keep doing because you think you are supposed to? What no longer feels like you? What still feels alive, even if only faintly? Those things are not small. That is often how direction begins returning. Not as one giant answer, but as a series of recognitions. This no longer fits. This matters more than I admitted. This feels lighter. This feels more true. That is how clarity often rebuilds. Slowly. Quietly. More honestly than before. So if you feel lost in life, pause. You may not be as far from yourself as you think. You may simply be in the part of the journey where the old direction is fading and the new one has not fully come into focus yet. That is uncomfortable. But it is not meaningless. And it is not proof that you are behind. Sometimes feeling lost is not the end of direction. Sometimes it is the beginning of a more honest one. And that may be where you are now. Not broken. Not failing. Not too late. Just between. And if you let this space be what it is, instead of turning it into a verdict about yourself, you may begin to hear what your life has been quietly trying to show you all along.